get to know people better. So this week, our own Reverend Lloyd has agreed to share his story. Please.
3-year-old Larry and his 5-year-old brother were quickly snuck out the back door of their upstairs apartment. Charlotte, their mother, had arranged with a friend to pick her and 2 boys up with her car in the back parking lot. Chuck had become a violent, abusive, alcoholic husband and father. And Charlotte had determined to protect her boys and herself. She packed 3-year-old Larry and his 5-year-old brother into the back seat of her friend's car, and she told them, "Keep your heads down and do not look out the back window." Larry and his brother grew up in back rooms and basements. And Charlotte, their mother, put food on the table, ironing other people's clothes. You guessed it, I'm Larry's brother, the 5-year-old, and no, I did not keep my head down. Yes, I did look out the window. I looked back, and I'll never forget what I saw. Chuck, my father, sitting on the steps of this apartment complex getting drunk with his buddies. I was 11 when my mother married again. He was a nice man. He was a Nebraska farm boy who grew up to be an electronics college instructor. He played with Larry and I once. It was a layup. Took all of about 3 seconds. And yet I still remember to this very day the sound of the coins and the keys rattling in his pocket. I'm a native Nebraskan. A few years ago I did a wedding in Mawa, and I went around to introduce myself to the family of those that were getting married. And I walked up to this one couple and I said, and I got three words into my introduction, into introducing myself, and they go, "Oh, you're not from here, are you?" I go, "No, I'm not from here. I'm from that place where you walk the dog and drink coffee. I'm not from that place where you walk the dog and drink coffee. I'm from Nebraska. And there really are some perks to living in Nebraska." Well, how about the deep snow? We all like deep snow. I remember waking up as a child, as a young boy, looking out the front window of our house and seeing the National Guard going through the streets with their trucks and their plows, digging us out from under 4 feet of snow. So we have the deep snow. Oh, we also have heavy, strong winds. Strong winds, another perk to living in Nebraska. Because Nebraska is as flat as a pancake, we have extremely high winds. There's nothing to stop the wind when it comes rolling, sweeping down the Rockies and into Nebraska. We have like no trees in Nebraska. Like 3% of our state is covered with trees. Very few trees. And maybe that's the reason that Arbor Day has its roots in Nebraska. Yeah. Nebraska is so flat that you.
How flat is it?
It's so flat that you can watch your dog run away for 3 days. Nebraska is so flat, we literally do not need TV weatherman in Nebraska. You want to know what the weather's going to be like tomorrow? Look west. You want to know how to dress tomorrow? Just look west. You see the weather coming. And you know you're from Nebraska when you're the only one in the room that can locate it on a map. And you know you're also from Nebraska when people approach you and seriously ask you, "Do Do you guys have running water and electricity in your homes? I bought my first horse when I was 10. $150. My parents didn't buy it for me. No, those weren't those days of, everybody being entitled. I worked for it. I paid for it. I bought it with my money. I paid for it. I brought it home and I rode it for 8 years until I enlisted in the Army and sold it.
How much you get for it?
I don't even remember that part of the story. But every time I rode that horse, every time it bucked. Every time. It bucked. And once it did, it was out of its system and we were good. But I have seen the underside of a horse more times than I ever wished to. I also started driving at the age of 10. I wasn't strong enough to lift the hay bales from the field into the back of the pickup. So guess who got to drive at the age of 10? With a pitchfork in my hand, I killed my first rattlesnake at the age of 12. I've been chased by dogs, chased by hogs, bitten by cats, bitten by a horse, pecked by chickens, knocked down by cows, kicked by cows more times than I ever wished to. Life in Nebraska. My wife Angelica and I married 33 years ago in a small village just outside Frankfurt, Germany. She had never been to America. I was about to take her to Nebraska. And yes, we are surprisingly still married. Well, the flight from Frankfurt to Chicago was uneventful. We switched planes in Chicago to Omaha in a 10-seater. And now what I'm about to tell you is exactly how this flight to Omaha went. We thought we were going to die. Now, I've been on roller coasters before. I know what it's like to ride in a roller coaster. Any roller coaster would have tipped their hat to that airplane ride. We thought we were going to die. Well, 2 hours later, we get to my parents' house. It's evening time. It's dinner time. My mom has prepared dinner. We sit down. My brother asks my wife, my newlywed wife, we've been married a week. We sit down to dinner. He asks her a question. He asks her, "Would you pass the butter?" Now, know this about Angelica. We spoke German the first 10 years of our marriage. This was week 1 of our marriage. Her foreign language of choice at that time was French. The only English that she had ever learned was from a grade school textbook. And here we are sitting at the dinner table, and my brother asks her, "Would you pass the butter?" She says, "Sorry." He says again, "Would you pass the butter?" She didn't know what "would you" meant. Would you? We had to teach her a lot of words. Like, "Would you, did you?" "You didn't bring any water, would you, did you?" That first night, it was so hot in the house that we thought, hey, let's put up a tent in the backyard. It's got to be cooler. We did. It wasn't. The next day, I said, hey, my parents have a pop-up. Let's go camping. That first night, we went to the drive-in movie theater at the park. We got 5 minutes into the opening commercials before we were chased away by severe weather. An ominous wall, a black wall, came up over the horizon at us there in that movie theater. Now remember, I just told you our weather comes from where? From the west. This was coming from the north. And it brought with it hail, thunder, lightning, heavy rain, strong winds. My wife could have won any Olympic long jumping record that night. Scared to death. after pastoring in Germany for 7 years and now in Midland Park for 23 years, for some reason we've never asked each other, hey, you want to move back to Nebraska? Let me take you back to 1978. At 18, I enlisted right out of high school into the Army. I had basic training in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, was later stationed in Fort Carson, Colorado, and then in Camp Eschborn, Germany. In 1980, in Camp Eschborn, Germany, I came to faith in Jesus Christ. Now that I was on my own, I began to see life differently, and I think more completely. Now, I couldn't run to mom and dad for help. Mom and dad, to bail me out or care or provide for me. I was on my own for the very first time in my life, and I began to wonder and ask why. Is this all that life is about? What's my purpose? Really, this is it? And looking back, I'm very thankful that I asked that question. I thank God that I asked that question. Really? That's it? Why? So in 1980, I set out looking for answers, and I began looking in all the wrong places. Parties, prostitutes, drug, alcohol, violence. Well, really not too much violence. A guy my size really shouldn't spend too much time being violent. No, that wasn't good. But I continued to ask, and I looked, and I continued to be disappointed with the things that I was trying. But I was still looking. You see, I was still looking in all the wrong places. Those things did not provide the answers for me that I thought they might. Actually, they only made things worse. One day it dawned on me, hey, why don't I try God? If what the churches teach is true, hey, why don't I try that? Maybe God can answer my questions. So for the first time in my life, I began to pray. There in the barracks, there on my bunk, I began to pray. And I prayed, God, if you really exist, would you please tell me what life's all about? Is this it, really? Tell me. I want to know. And although I continued to pray, I also continued to look in all the wrong places. And one day, so I decided to go to church, and I decided, hey, let's listen to the chaplain. Let's listen to him preach. And I had determined to listen to him and then to test his words, whether or not what he said was true. Here's how I did that. I listened, and I applied it to my life. I said, okay, if what he said is true, I'm going to try it out. I'm going to see if it works. I'm going to see if what he said would happen actually happens. It did, and I was convinced. The next night, Monday, August 4th, 1980, I grabbed my hash pipe, and I walked to the edge of the camp, and I threw that hash pipe into the forest. And then I sat down and I go, well, now what? And it was at that moment where I perceived a finger from heaven pointing down at me and a voice saying to me, all right, Lloyd, I've heard your prayers. I'm going to answer them. I'm going to give your life meaning and purpose. And it was at that moment that I was born again. You've heard the term. I was born again. And my heart was filled with such great joy. And I just wanted to run, and I wanted to tell everybody about what I just experienced, what just happened. I wanted to tell the chaplain. I wanted to run and tell his assistant who lived in the barracks next to me. I wanted to run and tell those people who were at that church service that I had attended the day prior. But I couldn't. It was 11:30 at night, so I decided not to. The next day, Tuesday evening, I remember sitting in a room with my friends. They were smoking hash. When the pipe came to me, I passed and I said, I'm a Christian now, I'm not smoking that stuff anymore. Somebody in that room said, don't worry guys, he'll be back. By the grace of God, it's been 39 years, and I've never gone back. Like the song says, I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back. The following evening, Wednesday evening, I attended a Christian coffee house, and I don't remember too much about that coffee house, except the guy sitting next to me, he said to me, "Lloyd, you know, this is a Christian meeting, right? You know what this is, right?" And I turned to that guy and said, "Yeah, you know what? I've been born again." He says, "Since you say that, I think this is the first time I've ever seen your eyes, eyes clear, not all watered up and bloodshot. First time I've seen a smile on your face." So I continued to attend church, made new friends. I also began to learn the German language and make friends in the German community. And let me tell you something about being stationed overseas in the Army. When you're stationed overseas in the Army, you bought one of two things. You either bought a stereo and you stayed in the barracks, you stayed in your room and you listened to your records, or you bought a camera and you went sightseeing and touring. I bought the latter. I bought a Canon AE1 and went touring. As I began to travel and learn the German language, I learned my first sentence in German. Gott liebt dich. God loves you. 3 words, not that hard. Gott liebt dich. Let me teach it to you. Gott liebt dich. Let's say it together. Gott liebt dich. Now, finally, equipped with my first sentence in German, I could barely wait for an opportunity to use it. Shortly before I was discharged from the Army, and yes, if I have to say so, honorably, I bumped into this teenage German girl that I had met before. So here's my opportunity. So I walked up to her and I said, "What?" Gott liebt dich. Yes, I did. Gott liebt dich. And that's all I remember about that encounter, except a month later, I bumped into one of her friends at a Bahnhaltestelle, train stop. And her friend turned to me and said, "You saved my friend's life." I did. She said she was going to commit suicide. And she remembered that you said to her, "Gott liebt dich." And she didn't do it. Still in Germany, I spent the next 5 years working as a carpenter. I worked for a guy who had spent a year in an American World War II prison camp in Chicago. This man had attempted during the war to be captured by Americans. He did not want to be captured by the Russians. Death in Siberia can be totally gruesome if you even made it to Siberia. Herman was his name. He learned some English while he was there in Chicago in that World War II prison camp, and Herman enjoyed cussing me out in English in front of all of his business associates. Herman also loved money more than his wife and kids. While working for Herman, I went to school and became a licensed mortise and tenon carpenter. We built houses that needed no nails because they interlocked. All the beams and studs and everything you call them in English, they all interlocked. Pretty useless trade in America, but they still build houses like that in Germany, and they seem to last forever. Of course, unless they've had to endure 2 world wars. One of my highlights of working as a carpenter in Germany was replacing some old beams high up in a church bell tower that was built in the year, this church was built in the year, get this, 1235.
Wow.
I got to work up there and help replace some of the studs around the clock of a church that was built in 1235. It was just incredible. In 1985, I began attending a German Bible college in a little beautiful town in north central Germany called Fritzlar. 5 years later, I began working and pastoring a church in a southern German community. It was a winery community called Neustadt. Vineyards as far as the eye could reach. And when I look back at our time in Neustadt, I often imagine that when God created Neustadt, he must have been thirsty. In 1996, a small church in Midland Park, New Jersey, began looking for a new pastor. They were hoping to find someone that could speak in German, someone who knew the German traditions and holidays and customs, but somebody who likewise could work in English. And somehow there was some pastor out in Michigan who knew the right guy out in Germany. 23 years later, I'm standing before you here at this Rotary Club meeting sharing my story. And my story has been changed by a little boy named Jorge. A little boy from Peru. He was at risk of dying. He had a defective heart. And in collaboration with the Gift of Life, this club, you, flew Jorge to New Jersey in 2014. And as God would have it, while Jorge flew to New Jersey, my water heater expansion tank sprang a leak. I made a phone call. Ron Pepper made a repair and invited me to this thing called Rotary.
All right.
This team, you guys, saved Jorge's life, and my life will never be the same. Rotary has provided me with a circle of friends who have joined hands to make a difference and leave this world better than we have found it. My name is Lloyd Vorderstrasse, and I am so glad and so happy to be a Rotarian. I want to place service above self, and together we can change the world one life at a time. Thank you.
All right.